Hey, how's it going out there, everybody? Cool Colas here, bringing you the hustler's perspective. I hope everybody is having a good day. As you can see, I got the afro thing going on today, so I changed it up a little bit. But don't want to waste too much time here. Just kind of want to get into the topic at hand. So today we're going to talk about the book reviews that will be done for the hustler's perspective. Specifically, we're going to talk about our first book today. So if any of you all have checked out the Hustler's Jackpot, excuse me, if any of you all have checked out the Hustler's Jackpot, then you've seen that I talked about wanting to talk about different books and reviewing them and then telling you which category they fall under and why you should view it and what my score would be for the book based on a certain criteria and things like that. So just wanted to kind of give you a brief kind of introduction on how I'm going to be doing these from the like this day forth. So there will be a book review done in a video once monthly, and it will be a book at random of my choice that will either fall under the category of financial thought processes, financial development, personal development, or it'll just fall under just learning new skills. So when you get guys like see these videos, you'll kind of get a feel for what I'm getting at, and you'll hear my recommendation and how I kind of feel about it. But let's get into it. So today I'm going to be telling you about Rich Dad Poor Dad. Rich Dad Poor Dad is a book by Robert Kiyosaki that is a lot about the process of understanding financial wealth. And from his perspective, he gives you a tale that kind of show you the means that people of ways people think and people who are rich versus people who are poor. And he used his two dads, his rich dad and his poor dad, as examples as to the differentiation between the ways that people think and the people that he was raised by think. So in one instance, he talks about his rich dad who gives him all of these like suggestions and kind of teaches him to a certain extent how to think like a wealthy person, and kind of gives him the suggestion of how they kind of go about their daily lives and the skills that they have and things like that. As far as the poor dad goes, he kind of gives that basic American stereotype where they talk about how a person needs to just work hard and go to get into a good college and then finally get a job and then pretty much work for the rest of their life and then just pay bills. So he kind of gives the perspective of this wealthy person who believes in these things that aren't really taught, that believes in financial education and understanding wealth and understanding how to view taxes and things like that. And then he goes into detail about this dad that he had that was more so on the employee side, who saw things from a perspective of just going to school and then working a job and things like that. So what I want to kind of get you guys into is a little bit about how I kind of stumbled upon this book, and then what I feel were the best takeaways from this book specifically. So the first thing is I stumbled upon this book because I had a person that I was meeting with for, and I don't know if you guys know what multi-level marketing is, but there was a person who I was meeting with at the time for a multi-level marketing type of group. And at the time, it wasn't something that I was interested in. And at the time, I guess it was just something that just wasn't really for me to really get into. And he kind of mentioned the book, and what he said, it was interesting because regardless of me not wanting to get into that multi-level marketing group, I still was very much interested in the book that he had said. And he said one book that kind of changed his life was Rich Dad Poor Dad, because it gave him an example of ways to just think about wealth and things like that, and the way so that you just think about growing up and seeing your ideal picture of how I guess your life is going to go from a financial standpoint, from an educational standpoint, things like that. And he was talking about how that got him into the whole multi-level marketing thing. But the multi-level marketing group that he was in, it wasn't really for me. I'm not saying that all network marketing groups are scams are illegitimate because there's a lot of very good businesses, but just like there's good businesses, there's bad businesses, and that's not just multi-level marketing. That's any business that you see. There's companies that are good, there's companies that are bad. It's just we don't view that way as people because we're so focused on getting a job and just working for them and just dealing with whatever crap that they give us. But there's some bad companies that you work for too. A lot of you all know it, or a lot of you all don't. You all just put up with it. So just keep that in mind too, just with the whole network marketing thing, and everybody talking about that's a scam and all that. So anyways, not to get off topic. So the takeaways are what I want to get into a little bit next here for Rich Dad, Poor Dad. So I don't want to sum up the book for you because I want you all to go out and get the book and read it. And whether it's by a PDF or whether it's by looking at like a hard copy of it, I encourage you all to get it. So I won't give you all a synopsis on it. I'll just give you all some of the major points that I think stuck out and I think are an outline of the themes that the book is trying to define for you as a person and as a potential person who doesn't really understand wealth and is trying to. So my first takeaway from this, and this is the kind of central point that was somewhat made but is stressed the most. The first one I want to kind of go into is that financial education is a crucial deciding factor. That's the first point I think that Robert Kiyosaki tried to make in this book. So one of the things that he said, and I'll quote him here, was one of the reasons the rich get rich and the poor get poorer and the middle class struggle in debt is because the subject of money is taught at home and not in school. So this was kind of interesting to me, and it was interesting to me because it kind of made me think about how, just society works in general. It seems as though there's some type of rift in these rich and poor people and their mindsets and the way that they think about money and things like that. So I think a lot of times what tends to happen is this influence of how financial independence and financial wealth is being taught. There's an issue with the fact that it's not really taught in school. So there's that dependence that a student would even have to learn that type of knowledge from their parents at that point, or for whoever's raising them, or whatever guardian they have, or brother and sister, or whoever. And if they don't have that knowledge, a lot of times those people are going to, kind of just be left out. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind, is that's a lot of times, like, the expectancy is that it would be taught in the home because school, for whatever reason, and I think it's on purpose, doesn't teach you that financial independence. Another thing that was said here, most of us learn about money from our parents. So what can a poor parent tell their child about money? They simply say, stay in school and study hard. So this pretty much right here defines that a lot of parents are not teaching their children this idea of how money should be used and what you should do with money. A lot of times their main focus is not in the right place. Although they know that one thing is important, that one thing being understanding what to do with your money and saving and budgeting, they emphasize other thing too much. They emphasize go to school, work hard. They emphasize that a lot more than they emphasize understanding financial education. So a lot of times, like, for parents, they don't have a lot to teach their kids about money and how it works and what to do with it and things like that. So and that's kind of a point that I made in one of my other videos. So another thing that he kind of goes into is that national debt is like partially understood by even like the like partially being like into a subpar extent. Like is even partially understood from like people who are even in these high positions. Even they don't really know anything about money like that. So like, some politicians and government officials and people who are making all these important decisions, they're causing that national debt. And they're causing the national debt because they don't have the financial expertise that they should have. So they're creating this world of liabilities and putting all these people under this world of liabilities, which is just, it's a shame. It's a shame. And it just tells you how much the education system should be teaching such things to people, because now the dependence has now fallen on parents and people like that to understand these things, to teach them to kids. So moving forward, he makes a comment about, how will a nation survive, and how will it survive, with teaching children about money, and how, a lot of parents are gonna continue to like be poor because they already have like this poor mindset, and because of that they can't really teach their children how to survive. So a lot of like the parents, I feel, have already kind of gotten themselves in a situation where they're poor, they're in debt and things like that themselves. So the only thing that they're pretty much doing is passing that on to the younger generations to come. And really, again, I don't really think that's something that's their fault. I think that the lack of that being taught in the education system is what caused that. So again, I think that he's just trying to emphasize in this book that of like what would be the way for children to be able to understand this idea of financial survival if parents will be or already are poor. So that's another thing I think that's emphasized. So the second big point I kind of want to get into here is that he made is learning the difference between assets and liabilities. I think this is a huge one, if not one of the biggest ones that's on this actual list. That and one of the biggest points that I think he makes in this entire novel. It's more, I think that's what you would call it, as a novel. But anyways, so he was talking about his family members, and I'll read to you what he has here. He says one family member believed that the house was an asset, and the other believed that you are in trouble if that's your largest investment. Now, this is an interesting point too as well, and it's interesting because it just differentiates two different mindsets. It differentiates a mindset of a person who believes that having a home is an asset, but critically points to the part that they're not really showing how it's a financial asset. They're just showing how it's an asset because they feel as though that's you owning something, but it doesn't have like the financial value that you would think it would. And how the other dad was saying that you're in trouble if you believe that, and because it says a lot about your mindset and how you think about wealth and how you think about the things that are actually financially helping you, and how there's like this big kind of thing or kind of acceptance in society that a house does have a relevant financial meaning, and it doesn't. So basically they were talking about also in this point specifically how the rich tend to acquire assets and the poor and the middle class tend to acquire liabilities. So basically, with that point being said, a lot of times the rich are trying to become richer, so they're always trying to find new ways to make money, and he's emphasizing that the poor and the middle class try to buy things. They're better at being consumers. They're better at saying, hey, I have this money, or I don't have this money, but I'll look cool with this, or I'll get to live a life where I can enjoy this thing or that thing. So that's another thing that he kind of emphasized here. And then he says another thing is he likes teaching children versus teaching adults. And the reason why is because it's difficult to teach assets and liabilities and the difference between them to adults. And a lot of times it's because they've already been taught a certain way, and they already have it set in their mind what they believe. So with a kid, they're open and they're going to soak up things like a sponge. So if you teach them early on, then they'll be able to learn certain things that adults will either one, not care to learn, or two, if they learn it, they might not agree with it, and they might still do whatever they've done. Because think about it, who wouldn't question something different that was taught to them after they've been taught a certain thing their entire life? So I think that's kind of the point that he was getting at. And he even creates a chart here that talks about the difference between the rich and the poor and the middle class. And this is kind of what it says here. So in the chart, he says he shows how the rich get richer. He says that the rich have income. Then after they have income, they build assets. So he has an arrow pointing from income to assets. Then he shows an arrow that points to more income is generated. But while this is being generated, expenses are low and liabilities are low as well too. So on top of that too, like expenses and liabilities generally kind of do the same thing. They put you in a certain amount of debt that you're bound to, that a lot of times you don't want to be bound to. So they try to keep those things low while they're building assets. So if they decide that they want to increase their liabilities, and they'll have those assets to offset them. In the meantime, they can continue to build more assets as things increase, and as this beautiful thing we call inflation decides to just make prices rise again. Prices rise again. Sorry. So anyway, so he kind of in a diagram, he also talks about why the middle class struggle, and he goes on to talk about how for the middle class, what tends to happen is they have income. That income, when they work a job and they work their way up the ladder and things like that, their income tends to go up. So as their income goes up, what tends to happen is their expenses go up as well too. And their expenses go up because they're like, hey, look at all this. I was once making 50K and now I'm making 70K. So now I can afford this and I can afford that. And they just do stuff like that. And that tends to be a middle class mindset. Is the reason why they stay in the middle class is because they tend to believe they can afford things after they have achieved a certain, amount of money just from their income. But one thing I noticed about this diagram is that when they were talking about the rich getting richer, they said income and then they acquire assets. No, not anywhere in this diagram did they say anything about the middle class acquiring assets. They simply said the middle class go from making more income to building or deciding to acquire more liabilities. So that's the difference. They're relying on one stream of income, whereas these rich people are relying on multiple. So let's kind of go into a little bit more. I kind of had a little bit more for you. I wanted to talk about some quotes and stuff like that. So excuse me if I had like that page all up in y'all face. I know you all probably like, oh, I want to see Cool Colas, I want to see his face all the time. Okay, probably not. Anyway, so let's go on to the third point here. So the third point is talking about, and this is what I call it, the power of association. And he even describes it as that in his book as well too. I think this is a very, very important part. Not even because it's talking about financial stuff, not even because it's talking about a mindset financially, but because it is simply talking about people in the company that they keep. That's really what it's about. People in the company that they keep. So basically, he talks about choosing your friends carefully, which you already know. You have to do that already in life, and you especially have to do that when you're hustling and when you're trying to make money and when you're trying to build wealth. He also talks about how he learns from both his rich friends and his poor friends. So that's nothing that stuck out to me, because a lot of people tend to say, oh, well, if I'm going to learn to build wealth, I just got to learn from the rich people. But that's not necessarily how you should go about it. If you're really going to get the whole picture, then you have to view it from everybody's standpoint. So you can see these poor people who are not doing anything with their money or not trying to build assets. I just had to pause for a second. I'm mad that light keeps like flickering in the back. That's like, it was just like throwing me off, because it was light for a second, then it got darker. I don't know, it was kind of weird, but anyways. So what was I saying to you all? Oh, so the thing is that for like your poor friends, you're learning what you don't want, what type of financial mistakes you don't want to make, and what type of financial I guess like just things that you just don't want to get yourself into, like liabilities. Your poor friends, they kind of teach you, I'm sorry, phone is over here just going off. They kind of teach you the things that you do not really want to get into, whereas your rich friends, they teach you about certain things that you do want to learn about, that'll help you build assets and things like that. So there's that. He talks about seeking the rich people's knowledge of money. He was talking about don't listen to the poor people who are in fear, and he calls them chicken littles, which I thought was kind of funny. And he said that what they do is they don't want to. I guess they live in the fear that they will always fail at something, and will always tell you if you are about to fail at something just because they feel as though it's not going to work for them. So they live in the fear that something bad is going to happen all the time. So you want to avoid those people is kind of what he's getting at. He also talks about how it takes courage to avoid doom and gloom advice because it's always out there, and there's always people who are trying to bring you down and things like that. So it's very common. And hearing that and hearing people who, because we live in a society of people who, they have free speech. They can say whatever they want. We live in a society of people who can spew off that negative energy. A lot of times we're going to absorb it, whether we realize it or whether we don't, because I truly believe in energies, and I truly believe that they are a real thing. So what tends to happen is, with that doom and gloom advice, you have to just try to avoid it. And I think what he tries to get at is, people who are able to avoid it, who are able to just kind of ignore that little, thing that they hear in their ear from that, they're brave because of the fact that they were able to do that. It's just easy to succumb to negative energy. And he talks about how cynics will never win because they're busy criticizing, and how the people who are not I guess cynical like that, they're more analyzing. He made that point, and that was interesting to me too. And it's interesting because it does seem as though people who are cynical, who are always having something to say, they're almost trying to find a way to see how something is going to fail. So they spend more energy in seeing how something is going to fail versus how it's going to succeed. So that's kind of what that's, I think, getting into. Whereas people who are not critics, they analyze and they see the way that things happen. They see both sides of the coin, but they aim for the good side of the coin, of course. And, they kind of see that picture. So yeah, that's that point. So point number 4. So this is a big one. I think also probably the second biggest point in this book. It's called mind your own business. So that sounds rude, but I think he means it differently in this book. So I kind of want to hit on a few points here that he kind of made. For one, he said one thing that's important is understanding your net worth and what your wealth is. Your net worth being the balance of your assets and your liabilities, and basically your income and expenses and things like that. So you're balancing all those things out, and you're coming up with this number that you have. So that's your net worth, if you don't know what that means. So in other words, I'll go a little bit slower because I did say that pretty fast. I'll give you an example. It's the combination of your assets, your liabilities, your income, and your expenses. So let's say that you make $50,000 a year. Let's say that you have no assets. Let's say that you have $120,000, God forbid, $1,000 of student loan debt, and let's say that you have $15,000 or $20,000 in credit card debt. Your net worth is negative at that point because all you have is your income. You have your 50,000, and you have all this debt still kind of sitting around. That's that means you don't have anything net worth wise. So that, I guess that's kind of what that means, but not saying that that's what he was defining, but I was just giving you a concrete example. I also talked about how understanding that being rich is an eye of the beholder. So that's part of mind your own business, because to some people, a certain amount of wealth may be rich, and to others it may not. They may not consider that rich, or they may not consider that same number that you consider to be wealthy. They may not see it the same way, and they may be looking to aim for more, or they may feel they just need to stop right there. So that's another thing, is finding out your goals and what you consider to be rich. And then it talks about knowing the difference between your business and your profession. And I think this is a huge one, because I know how many, I don't know how many times I go somewhere and have a conversation with somebody, and they say, or they'll ask me or someone else or whatever, hey, what's your job? Oh, what does your business do? And mind you, I do own a small business, but let's say that my job, for example, is okay, I'm a bagger at Kroger's, or I'm a bagger at Meijer, whatever, bagger at Meijer. And let's say that somebody comes up to me, and then I tell them I work for Meijer, and they say, how's your business doing? It's not really my business. I'm a bagger at Meijer. So that's my profession, is being a bagger. It's not my business. Or I'll even give you a better example. Even like a salesperson who like technically they're talking about how they're always like their own boss. So let's say that you work for a high quality sales firm, and then someone asks you like, how's your business going? And then you say it's going good, yada yada yada. You're politically incorrect because you don't have a business. You're not minding your own business. You're minding someone else's business. That's what it is. By being an employee, you're minding someone else's business. And again, I'm not insinuating that's a bad thing. I'm just simply saying that is what he is getting at in this novel, because he even uses the example. The person asks him a question, "What is your business?" And then the person answers, "Oh, I'm a banker." And then he says, "Do you own the bank?" And they say no. That's their profession at that point. That is not their business. So that's just another example to kind of, so you all kind of understand where I'm coming from. So basically, he also talks about how the problem with school is that you become what you study, and you end up minding someone else's business. So in other words, you're trained, and I said this before many times. You're trained to be a robot. You're trained to be a working robot without being taught how to work or the skills in working. And then once you become this working robot, you and whatever profession it is while you're in school. So basically you're like a pre-working robot without being taught the professions of what it means to actually work. Then you become a working robot. That's what it is. So in other words, you go to school, you go into a certain major, and then I've seen this thousands and billions of times. I think it happens to like 90% of people I know. They go into a certain major. So if you go into biology, you're all about biology. Your whole life is biology. Then you get out of school, and then you're hoping to be a biologist. That's not your business. That is your profession. At that point, you were minding someone else's business because you were working for someone as a biologist. Again, nothing wrong with it if that's what you want. I am simply just saying what the book is iterating. Now, another thing too that they talked about is building a base of solid assets, and to stop looking and focusing on income statements. And basically talks about how people have this whole attitude where they're like, if only I had a promotion, oh, I'm quitting in 2 weeks because I have a better job and things like that. He says he was talking about how that type of mindset is for the mindset of a working person who is more concerned about income and is more concerned about that source being their income, because that is their main focus. But they're not focused on building things on the side and building assets that are going to kind of give them wealth, so that's not even really a factor. Again, too much of an emphasis on minding someone else's business versus minding your own business. Building an asset is a thing that a rich person does to mind their own business. Building or looking for other jobs and looking for a job with more money, that's minding someone else's business. But you're minding like to someone else's, if that makes sense, because you're minding the business of the job you're working, then you're minding the business of another job that you're trying to get. So that's another thing. Now let's go to this last point. This last point is about paying yourself first. So these are the things that I kind of caught from this, because this one was talked about a lot as well too. So the first thing is that it makes no sense to invest your money and just blow it. So in other words, it's basically saying that, like if you have money and you're getting it, you should be giving it to yourself. You shouldn't be giving it back to different employers and different businesses and things like that. So, and a lot of you are like, oh, well, you have to do that anyway. And it's like, no, you really don't, because you don't have to do retail shopping all the time, because that's giving your money away to businesses. You don't, and if you think that you're safe when you go to restaurants, you're not, because that's giving it back to a business. If you said, oh, I want a hamburger at McDonald's, you're giving your money to McDonald's. So that's what I'm saying. That's a business. So that's what I'm saying is that you need to, when you have money like that, you need to invest in yourself first. Create limits for yourself, what you can and cannot do, and then invest in yourself. That's what I believe. Not saying that's what the book is saying. That I'm just telling you that's what I believe. But that's why that point struck home for me. So the next one is a lack of self-discipline is the most difficult part of transitioning from being rich to being poor. So if you don't have discipline, then your habits aren't going to be created. If you don't have habits, you won't have a habit of trying to put yourself in a better position. That's kind of like a rule of thumb anyway. Like if you don't have a habit and you don't can stick with something, you're not going to get better at it. So, focusing on that point with business, it kind of works the same way. And it works that same way because, like, if you're not looking to always read, if you're not looking always to just figure out new things, listen to podcasts, listen to videos, and just listen to people who have influential advice and seeking out maybe a mentor or somebody like that who can help you in a certain way. If you're not doing those things, repeatedly and creating a schedule for yourself of habits, then you don't have the discipline to transition. Other thing it talks about is focusing on management skills and more than just learning about a product, and how like each month you should allocate money to assets before paying your monthly expenses. I think what he's getting at here is just specifying that you should take some time to put something in your wallet first before you go and you pay all of your bills. So he's making, because he makes a further point talking about how like even if you are like behind, if you pay yourself first and you're behind on your bills and all that, it should inspire you, to go out to make more money so that you will be able to pay your bills as well too. So I think he's just talking straight on motivation and how paying yourself should allow you to say, hey, I need to work harder to do these other things that still have to get done after, investing in myself or putting money aside for, whatever reason it is, put in your savings, put in your IRA, learning a new skill, whatever the thing is that you're doing. And then he says like minding your own, or at least paying yourself. I said mind your own business. Sorry. Paying yourself first also helps you to avoid situations such as like high credit card debt. And basically, I think what he's saying is like you're trying to avoid, or a lot of times you avoid getting like extra consumer debt, because a lot of times like people are trying to get these credit cards, and they'll just put like whatever it is that they have to pay on the credit card and then just like pay it off later, and they put themselves in extra debt. Again, like you're putting money into like another business after like actually paying your bill. So you're not really paying yourself. You're paying two different businesses in order to get the job done. So that's another thing I think he was kind of getting at there. So that's kind of like my 5 points I wanted to kind of touch on a little bit. So let me just kind of tell you what I personally think about the book and how, and who I think it relates to and things like that. So I think it was a pretty decent book. I thought it was pretty good when I read it. I think that it has strengths. I think it has weaknesses, and I'll get into that in a second. But I think that it's a good book for people who. It's a starter book. It's a good book for people who want to know more about financial education. It's a good book for people who want to change their mindset. It's a good book for changing a mindset. It's a good book for showing the difference and differentiating between wealth and poverty. It does, and not just from a physical standpoint, but from a mental standpoint. It tells the difference between those things. The other thing that I think it is I think it's a book that puts these thoughts into your head and makes you want to know more, or at least it did with me. It made me want to know a lot more about what it was out there. And I think after I got laid off from a job that I had, the more that I read this book, the more that I thought, wow, all this is out there and I didn't know it, because I'm sitting here sweating over this job that I lost and things like that. And there's a whole nother world out there that I need to explore. Mind you, I mean, like, that it's still going to be a difficult situation, but it made me just think like, wow, what else is out there? I'm sitting there thinking that it's I lost a job. It's not necessarily the end of the world, but it definitely sucks. And because this is my only option, and this told me that it wasn't my only option. So I think what it did something great for me in the fact that it started creating the real me. It started creating the me who wanted better for myself and actually understood myself for the first time ever in my life. I think that it did a good job of basically starting a fire. So that's why I think it is. What do I rate it? I rate this book 76 out of 100. And that's by a ratio of like if I was going 23 out of 30. And here was my rating. So I rated it based off of its message. I rated it based off of the concrete points, or basically concrete proof that it had, financially and like numbers and things like that. And I rated it based off of just your ability to be able to comprehend it. So I thought it had a great message, so I gave it a 9 on the message. I think that the message was absolutely phenomenal, and I thought that the way that it was conveyed was good enough or great enough so that other people who might not even be close to financially literate can understand what was being said. And I think it did a great job of those two things. I thought it was a bit mediocre though on the like concrete proof side because it didn't do a lot with like numbers for me. I mean, like it kind of said some stuff like it talked about like taxes and things like that, and it kind of made a few comparisons, but like financial tips and things like that. If you're talking about concrete numbers and like how to like deviate like certain things, like it I don't think it went into that well enough in my personal opinion. But then again, I had to think about it from the standpoint of was it really supposed to, or was it supposed to just start you off and get you on the right track? So I mean, like, but I'm just saying that for you know, viewers. And I talked to a friend recently, and he was telling me how he didn't like the book. He told me that he thought the book was pretty weak, and he thought that the book was weak because of the fact that he said that it didn't really do a good job of like telling those concrete facts. Like I said, like it didn't tell about a bunch of numbers, and like for a book that was somewhat about finance, it didn't really hit the nail on those things. Although like it did in some instances talk about the percentages of how much they take out of tax wise, like in your check and things like that. It did talk about that stuff, but I mean, like it briefed it more than it went into detail of it. But what I told him specifically was this is a good starter book. This is a good book for people who are trying to understand themselves in a financial way, and who are trying to get started, and who are trying to see a different part of life, and who aren't necessarily trying to focus on the idea that they need to just work from somebody. They're trying to focus on other ways in which they can make money, and other ways in which, you know, they can build assets and things like that. So I would say it was a bit abstract, and I mean that's good. Again, it gets the brain juices flowing, but it was like very abstract, which again, to some people that's good, to some people that's bad. To each his own on that one. But like I said, I would give the book about, you know, 76 out of 100. And no, I'm not going by the grading scale where that's a C. I'm just saying that, you know, it's kind of giving you a rating that it's about a good to fair book. I would say it's pretty good. It's kind of like, I don't know, like, I don't know if any of you all like kind of had this experience, but like, you know, back in the day, like, you know, you would talk to your friends and like, you know, just talking about just guys, you would talk to your friends and you would see a girl, and then you know, you would rate them or whatever, and you're like, okay, so what do you think she's out of 10? And then you say like, you know, she's a 7 out of 10. Doesn't mean that she's average. It doesn't mean that she's a C. It just means that, you know, she's kind of cute, you know, and that's it. You know, it's kind of like that. And I made that comparison so you could see it differently, because when you think C, you're like, oh, average. And I'm not saying it's an average book. It's not an average book. It's a really good startup book. It's just not a good book if you're looking for like concrete numbers and facts and figures and things that kind of show you proofs that some of these things are factual. It doesn't do that. But I don't think that it's meant to do that. So again, like it's kind of like I'm just showing you both sides of the coin here. So who would I recommend it to? Again, beginners who are looking to change their lifestyle. I'm looking to show this also to people who are interested in real estate and are interested in the idea that real estate is a good way to make extra income. I also think that it's a good book for a person who is kind of like lost and is trying to figure out, hey, like, is there another way, or should I just like stay with my job? Or, you know, if you're on that fence, like, should I just stay with my job, or should I like, you know, build some assets? Do I actually want to be rich and things like that? It puts those things into perspective. I'm sorry, I keep wiping my forehead. It is hot here. You know, Michigan is usually known for being cold, but it is the summer, and I swear it was like almost 100 today, and it was super hot. It's still hot in my apartment, so I didn't have my fan in here because I wanted you all to hear me. But anyways, kind of wanted to say that. But I think young children need to hear this, like, you know, like children who are just learning this type of stuff, because they need it soaked into their mind early. They don't need to learn this later. Now, mind you, I do think it should be for young people as well too, because young people can at least say, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense, yeah. But you don't, I wouldn't recommend it for an older person, because an older person may just write it off and they'll say, yeah, I heard that, whatever. I'm not recommending it for an older person. I think this is for younger people, and I think it's for children, people who are still either willing or need to learn something that's going to be beneficial to their life and their mindset, basically. So the what type of book do I think this is? I think that there's kind of a segue here. I think it's partially personal development, and I think it's partially financial thought. But I think it takes both of those and it sandwiches them together. So if you're looking for a personal development book, or you're looking for a book that helps you with your financial thoughts, this is the book for you. And this is a great starter book if you're just getting on topic. Anyways, with that being said, I hope everybody is having, God, it's hot. I hope everybody is having a good day. And I hope that you guys enjoy the video. If you like the video, then feel free to subscribe to my channel at The Hustler's Perspective. If you guys like to follow like what I put on my blog and see what I talk about there and see the same review in a typed out format, feel free to subscribe to thehustlersjackpot.com because that will come to you, and so will other blogs going forward. If you want to follow me at my Instagram channel, my personal Instagram, you can follow me at Cool Colas. If you want to follow my business channel for Instagram, you can follow me at The Hustlers Jackpot. If you want to follow my Facebook page, because now I have a Facebook page for my YouTube channel, you can follow me at The Hustler's Perspective YouTube channel, and I'll put that up here so you'll be able to see it. And if you want to follow my blog channel on Facebook, you can follow me at The Hustler's Jackpot, and you can just look that up as well too on Facebook. But anyways, again, I hope everybody has a great day. I hope everybody enjoyed this video. I hope everybody is looking forward to the other books that will be talked about in the future, and just keep hustling. See you later.